Good morning, everyone, and welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe alongside Nick Wright, Kevin Wildes, Brian Westbrook with us on a Tuesday morning. A lot going on today. Adam Silver has weighed in now on the latest with the NBA return. We'll have Rockets GM Daryl Morey stopping by to discuss that and to discuss the new svelte, slimmed-down James Harden. And will there be baseball again this season? Tom Verducci will let us know. He will join us as well. We got a lot to get to. But this morning, we will start in the NFL with the latest news on Colin Kaepernick. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell was asked about the 32-year-old still free agent last night and had these interesting words. He said, quote, if he wants to resume his career in the NFL, then obviously it's going to take a team to make that decision. But I welcome that. I support a club making that decision, and I encourage them to do that. If his efforts are not on the field but continuing to work in this space, we welcome him to that table and to help us, guide us, help us make better decisions about the kinds of things that need to be done in the communities. We have invited him in before, and we want to make sure that everybody's welcome at the table and trying to help us deal with some very complex, difficult issues that have been around for a long time. But I hope we're at a point now where everybody's committed to making long-term sustainable change. So, Nick, Roger Goodell encouraging teams to sign Colin Kaepernick. What do you make of what Goodell had to say last night?
So, I guess a couple things primarily. One is, it is immense movement from the commissioner who just this past December, after Cap's workout went awry, Roger Goodell said publicly, we've moved on from Colin Kaepernick. So December saying we moved on to now in June saying he encourages a team to sign him. It's immense movement, and I'm glad Commissioner Goodell has moved on that front. And I can also answer Commissioner Goodell's, almost question within his quote, if Colin wants to resume his career. I can tell you unequivocally, without any question, from firsthand conversations, Colin Kaepernick desperately wants to resume his career that he feels he never should have had to pause while he was fighting for not only social equality, but very specifically trying to shine a light on police brutality against minority communities. So I'm encouraged by this, but it's my job here to give you my honest opinion. My honest opinion is Colin Kaepernick's never going to play in the NFL again. I think there are three primary reasons he'll never play in the league again. And we'll start with the first one, which is I think people misunderstand the level of support this cause has nationally. We aren't good at math in this country. Nate Silver, a great mathematician, said Hillary Clinton had a 70% chance to win the election, which means she had a 30% chance to lose it. When she lost it, everyone's like, oh, Nate Silver doesn't know what the hell he's doing. But 30% outcomes happen all the time. But we can't conceptualize that. So when you hear 60% of white Americans currently support the Black Lives Matter movement, you say, wow, how far we've come. What amazing strides we've made. And that's true. But that also means 40% don't. That's nearly 100 million white folks in this country that can't even say, I support Black Lives Matter, much less supporting taking a knee during the national anthem to symbolically combat police brutality. Say this. There's at least, in my mind, 15, 16, 17 owners at a minimum that just immediately cross Colin off the list based on that. The second issue is, I think the scars from suing the league are still very raw. Troy Vincent, who was one of Colin's largest and loudest, I should say, advocates during his, the previous 3 years when he's been out of the league, within the league office, Troy Vincent had a very interesting comment just last night to Adam Schefter when he said, I have advocated for Colin publicly, privately, and then he added, even before a judge, which is an allusion to the lawsuit Colin, I think justifiably, but still the lawsuit Colin brought against the league. I think that burnt some further bridges, either with the league office or certainly with some owners. And then the last one is the closest to a football reason we can come to, which is we now have, 4, 5, 6 teams maybe left where the owner would sign off on it, where the GM would sign off on it. You need them to also have a coach that is comfortable and confident enough in his position to have that powerful of a voice enter his locker room. That powerful of a voice enter his locker room, not even as what we would assume to be a starting player. So none of these to me are fair reasons why Colin won't play again in the NFL. I think they're all wildly unfair. And I think he'd be great for a locker room. And I think he actually would drive ticket sales and jersey sales up when you look at the totality of it. Certainly some people would walk, but some new people would come to your team. But if I'm giving you my honest answer is I think January 1st, 2017 was the last game Colin Kaepernick will ever play in the NFL, unfortunately, Wilds.
So Nick, I hear you, and in the back half of your answer had a little bit of optimism to it. I'm far more optimistic. And just to address your coach concern, if you're a coach who cannot coach Colin Kaepernick, you don't belong in the NFL. If he is a great guy in the locker room, this was proven with the 49ers. If you can't coach Colin Kaepernick, if you look at the team owner and say, hey, you know, I know you support Colin Kaepernick, but I can't coach him, then that you cannot do your job and you should be out of the league. So that's the first thing. I'm far more optimistic, Nick. I have some football reasons. I have some sea change reasons. One, I think Goodell is encouraging him. He said it himself. So I think we're further along than we ever have been in the last 4 years. Two, Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll said a team called him, so we know at least one team is inquiring. Is there more than one team? I would hope so. I doubt that it's just one team, but I don't know that on any authority. Three, there's some actual football reasons. The game day rosters have gone from 46 to 48, so there's literally more spots available on the game day roster with the new CBA. And then the calendar year, Brian, we've got down, I asked our researcher, Dusty, he said the Jets, Steelers, and Giants have 5 QBs right now. And, of course, they all won't make the final roster. But if teams have 5 QBs, I feel like there's more of an opportunity for Colin Kaepernick to get in, prove that he belongs in the NFL, which he always has. So I'm a little bit more optimistic than Nick here.
You know, Kevin, I want to be optimistic as well. I heard Roger Goodell's first statement when he had this video about a week and a half ago about all the mistakes that the NFL has made, not listening to his players, as well as making a statement that Black Lives Matter. The one thing that he didn't talk about in that first video statement was addressing Colin Kaepernick. And I think he tried to rectify that in his statements yesterday by saying he encourages owners to give Colin an opportunity. And it kind of sounds like if Colin could not get on a team, that he would give Colin an opportunity inside the league with helping them with some reform, trying to fight police brutality and systematic racism throughout the NFL and really in the world in general. I have to be honest with you guys, and I appreciate this change. I appreciate him saying that, you know, what he said last year in December until now. There's a big time change, and I think that we have to recognize that and appreciate that. And now I believe that he stands on the right side of things where he's fighting with us to try to make things right in our world. But I am very skeptical, similar to Nick in this way, because at this point, it's easy for Roger Goodell. It's easy for owners to say, you know what, I want to stand with the players, because now we have some of the best players in all of our leagues. LeBron, we saw the video that we had last week with some of the NFL players stepping up and saying, we stand with Colin. We're fighting systematic oppression. We're fighting police brutality. So it's easier for the owners to step up, and Roger Goodell as well to step up and say that to support at this point. It's also easier for a team to send out a statement, to have a secretary write a statement and to send that statement out. It's easy for billionaires to donate millions of dollars. And I know that's a lot of money for a lot of people, but when you're a billionaire, just to give money, that's the easiest thing that you could do. This is what we need at this point, try to help things. We have to, and we need the support of those owners, the support that I think Roger Goodell has given us, and the fight to stop all of these things, systematic oppression, systematic injustices, police brutality as well. We need their support. We need them to stand with us. We don't need you to write a statement. We need you to stand with us. We need your time. We need you to go and advocate with us to the highest level of the criminal system, to the highest level of government. We need your support in doing that. We need the opportunity for you to say, you know what, I'm going to be not only with our players in words and in dollars, but when they go and talk to these communities, I'm going to be standing right there with them. We need our owners to use their political power and influence to start a change. We have so much power, and the owners have so much power. Just think about the power they have when they're asking our communities for money for their stadium. Think about the power that they have when they're fighting for more money in the CBA. We need that type of power at this point to help initiate change in our country. And I think if we do that, then the players won't be as skeptical as some of these owners about some of the things that they're saying. Look, last thing, and I think this is a good quote from a movie that I like. It's called The Color Purple. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it. Whoopi Goldberg told Danny Glover at this point, she said, listen, until you do right by me, everything that you think is going to crumble. And I think a lot of players will remain skeptical until you do right by Colin Kaepernick and give him that opportunity. And I think what Roger Goodell said yesterday is at least a step in the right direction to try to get that done.
Brian, I love everything you laid out. They're big, sweeping changes. But, Nick, you wonder how much of that is predicated on first getting Colin Kaepernick back into the league. Between what Roger Goodell said last night, the nationwide protests, other players in the league voicing their opinions, how much weight does all of that carry? How much of that do owners hear and are hearing to maybe ease a transition for Colin Kaepernick back into this league?
Oh, listen, they obviously hear it, but I don't know that enough of them actually agree with it. And I also think the ones that do agree with it have been convinced, at least some have been convinced, I think erroneously, but have been convinced that Colin is bad for business, in part because they have more of an ear to the people and the communities that are angriest at Colin, rather than the people in the communities who are most thankful and most supportive of Colin, which again would take more of a systemic change within the way kind of the NFL does business in order for those marginalized communities to have their voices heard as much as loudly as the very loud detractors of Colin. But I want to finish with this, because I know for some people, and I'm not saying you're wrong here, for some folks, everything the NFL does and everything Roger Goodell says is going to ring hollow as long as Colin's not in the league. I don't think that's fair. And I don't think it's helpful for those of us who have been trying to push towards change, try to affect some change, if every incremental win is not at least minorly celebrated because the war is still yet to be won. The NFL went from essential total ban on kneeling to J.J. Watt saying he would be kneeling, Baker saying, or J.J. Watt at least implying he might, Baker saying he will be kneeling. You have two very prominent white players. And the league, I saw a half dozen teams yesterday say they're going to take Juneteenth as a team-issued holiday, a day off, something this country should have done for the last 155 years. And there is, to me, something happened in NASCAR last week when NASCAR banned the Confederate flag. And I understand a lot of people's reaction was, what the hell took you so long? And I get that. But the other side of that is, at least it finally happened. And at least we are now, for the majority of people, are recognizing this unalterable truth. Colin was right. Colin's cause was just. It was as big of an issue as he was screaming from the mountaintops that it was, and more people should have listened to him. I believe when Roger Goodell says in that statement, not the one yesterday, but the one a week ago, quote, without black players, there would not be a National Football League. That is a massive, obvious statement of truth, but one that I don't think you could have ever imagined the commissioner uttering even 6 months ago. So the ball is moving, and I think it can be, for people fighting the hardest for it, if you don't take any satisfaction, even in the smallest victories, it's demoralizing. I understand there's a ton of work left to be done, and there are going to be some work that won't get done, like Colin getting back in the league. I don't think will get done. But that doesn't mean that the movement towards progress can't can't be celebrated to a degree, even if we understand the job is far from finished, Jenna.
Nick, you're so right. It's a small step forward, and that should be in and of itself celebrated. Once again, our top story, Roger Goodell encouraging teams now to go out and sign Colin Kaepernick.
A healthy lifestyle should be easy, right? Eat veggies, drink green smoothies, exercise, get your heart rate up, and do yoga to bring your heart rate back down. Well, maybe not so easy, but there is something that helps improve everything, and you can literally do it with your eyes closed. It's sleep. Sleep Number knows what it takes to sleep your best. The Sleep Number 360 smart bed lets you choose your ideal firmness, comfort, and support on each side, your Sleep Number setting. It's the perfect solution for couples. These beds are so smart, they respond to your every move and automatically adjust to keep you sleeping comfortably all night. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. And now, during the lowest prices of the season sale, save $400 on Queen Sleep Number 360 C4 smart bed. Now, only $12.99. You'll only find Sleep Number at Sleep Number stores or by visiting www.sleepnumber.com.
Back here with Chris Broussard on First Things First. All right, Broussard, the NBA set to return on July 30th. But over the last couple of days, we've been hearing rumblings of players considering sitting out in a stand for social justice, along with other concerns surrounding health and money. Well, last night, the NBA commissioner, Adam Silver, weighed in. He said, quote, "I can only say it may not be for everyone. It will entail enormous sacrifice on behalf of those players and for everyone involved, the coaches, the referees. Listen, it's not an ideal situation. My sense is we're going to be able to work through most of those issues during the next few weeks. But as I've said, we also have an arrangement with the Players Association where if a player chooses not to come, it's not a breach of his contract. We accept that." Nick, I'll start with you. The first part of what Adam Silver had to say. What do you think about how he addressed the players' concerns?
Listen, the single biggest reason I am still extremely confident that the NBA is going to resume on July 30th as scheduled is because, unlike we have seen in other sports, most notably what's going on with Major League Baseball right now, instead of an air of mistrust between the players and management or the players and the commissioner, there is immense trust between the players and management and the players and the commissioner. Not only trust that they are being honest with each other, but trust that their priorities on real life issues are aligned. Back when the NFL was dealing with the controversy surrounding players kneeling during the anthem, that was legal, according to the NFL CBA, for players to do, and it was still wildly controversial. It's actually not allowed by the NBA CBA, but Adam Silver recognized the moment and said, we're going to talk to our players and figure out what's right. A couple years ago, there was not an uproar, but a minor discussion about whether or not the term owner should be used when we talk about sports teams. You know what the NBA came out and said? Let's just move towards calling what have traditionally been called owners governors. Is it the biggest deal in the world? No. Is it the top priority on anyone's agenda? No. But it's something that would matter at least somewhat to some of our players. It costs us nothing, so why not just do it? Because they feel, the players feel it would be the right thing to do, and the league might actually agree with them. And so because of that, Wilds, I'm not really concerned that some team executive or league executive is going to say something way out of pocket about these protests. I don't think Adam Silver is going to do something to set the league back. And I think the players genuinely, for the most part, Wilds, trust that the commissioner is aligned with them on all these issues together. And I think that's the most important part here.
I agree. And on the players' side, I just want to take a moment to talk about Chris Paul and Chris Paul's leadership. You know, he's dealing with so many issues right now, maybe more than any other Players Association president, and he has to play. So the idea that he's talking about the safety of the players, We're talking about social justice initiatives. We're talking about how logistically the bubble will work, Broussard. And on top of that, Chris is going through and looking at all of that. And then on top of that, he's going to have to suit up and play. I think is just he's shouldering an immense amount of responsibility. And I think it's just kudos to him to be able to keep this restart on track with all of the responsibilities that he has.
You both made very good points, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. There is great trust between Adam Silver and the Players Association and the players themselves. And that is very good, and Adam has earned that respect. I do think, and I do like the fact he said last night this hasn't gotten a lot of play, but that when they're in the bubble in Orlando, the league is going to bring in speakers to speak with the players about ways that they can positively impact their communities. I hope those speakers include educators, economists, entrepreneurs, lawmakers, and people that run police departments. So I think that's a great idea. I think you should consult the players and some others about the right people to bring in. All that said, I do think there's more that Adam Silver and the NBA can do, for sure. Number one, you brought up the national anthem, Nick, and you're right. I don't think players will kneel at this point because they believe that Adam and the NBA have their back. However, I still think Adam Silver should get rid of the rule that you have to stand during the national anthem. We saw the U.S. Soccer Federation recently got rid of that rule. One, players should be able to do whatever they want during that time. But two, if players do decide to kneel, and I do think during the national anthem that is still the most powerful statement they could make, more so than locking arms, raising fists, or what have you, because it's associated now with Colin Kaepernick and with the protest for social injustice. If they do decide to kneel, he could be embarrassed, because I don't think he would, pull rank and try to fine players or anything like that. I think he would let it go. So it could make him look a bit weak. So I think he needs to get rid of that rule. Secondly, and I believe that the league will do something in the future. I have no doubt about Adam's commitment to fighting social injustice. And they're, I assume, trying to come up with ideas and putting things together. But we have seen the NFL, and I know they've kind of been forced into it, but they have committed $250 million. If you include the $100 million or $90 million last year, a couple years ago, that's basically $350 million to fight social injustice and systemic racism over the next 10 years. Not a huge amount of money, relatively speaking, but it still means a lot to those groups that in the grassroots organizations that will be fighting against these things. I'd like to see the NBA do something similar, if not even bigger. I know that Inspire Change organization and the Players Coalition that got that money from the league, they have done a lot. They have been in Florida and other states changing laws. The money they're giving to these organizations is really helping things. So I think the NBA needs to do some of that as well.
It's a great point, Broussard. Nick, quickly, I wanted to ask you about the other thing Adam Silver was talking about players not being in breach of their contract should they not show up to play at the NBA's restart. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I don't think that's only about, in fact, I know that's not only about what's going on with the nationwide protests and the epidemic of police brutality. That's also about the legitimate health concerns of subjecting yourself potentially to exposure to COVID. And we've seen that while certain folks have been asymptomatic, Von Miller, who's in amazing shape, said it was the worst thing he's ever been through. But it's also the aspect of the minimum length of time, if you go to Orlando, that you are away from your family is 7 weeks. And while Jenna Broussard, we've all, because of work, had to be away from our family for at least a couple weeks at a time. When I lived in LA and my family lived in Houston, I went back almost every weekend, even if it was just for 36 hours, because it was brutal not being able to see your wife and kids. And folks say, well, NBA guys travel all the time, not for a 2-month stretch. So, Kevin, I do think it'd be totally legitimate. And I wouldn't judge guys if they say, at no point when I signed up to be an NBA player did I sign up to not be with my wife and children or significant other or whomever for a 2-month stretch. I know certain people do it. Guys that work on oil rigs do it. Military members do it. But those guys know they were signing up for that going into it. So I think, Kevin, I think it's critical that Silver has said, if you don't want to go, you don't have to go, and you're not going to be penalized other than that you're not going to get paid.
Yeah, well, not getting paid is, if that's not considered a penalty, but the way that the contracts are working out here, for start, it's really just, I would describe it as weird. So Trae Young's team's not going. He's getting paid. LaMarcus Aldridge is having surgery and his team's going. He'll get paid. If I was on the team and I said, hey, I just don't want to go, I wouldn't get paid. So I don't know if this is going to surface more and be negotiated again, but it feels, I don't know, sorry, the only word I have for it is weird.
Well, they're really only getting paid for those 8 games in the regular season. Playoffs is a share. And remember, they've been paid most of their money for last season. That's the difference between them and baseball, is that baseball, if the players sat out in baseball, they'd be forfeiting their entire year's salary. NBA players have made most of that already.
Last week, MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred was 100% confident there would be baseball played this season. He has since walked those comments back, saying last night that he's, quote, not confident about the possibility of a 2020 season. So with the return of baseball now up in the air, who better to join us than MLB analyst Tom Verducci. Tom, good morning. Thanks for being with us. Hey, like the commissioner last week, I was all in. Baseball's coming back. I was excited. Woke up this morning. I might be all out. I'm not sure. Tom, explain to the audience, how did we get to this point?
Well, listen, I think the best word to keep in mind here is distrust. These two sides distrust each other so much, they can't agree on what they agreed on. They had an agreement back in March, and they can't agree on what they agreed on because the owners think they have the right to revisit that agreement based on playing in empty ballparks. And the players are saying, no, we already took a pay cut. We're done taking pay cuts. So there's a lot of distrust here. I think you also have to remember here that the players looked at this as a way to look globally at the game. They have a CBA coming up in a year. And I think they're saying, prove to us that you're hurting economically. We want to see your books almost as a precursor to CBA negotiations. And the owners are looking at this as a one-off. How do we get baseball back following a global pandemic? So I think the perspective of the players is much broader. They want to bring every argument to the table, where the owners are saying, let's figure out a way in a very narrow window to solve this issue, and then we'll worry about the CBA. But so far, the two different perspectives are leaving them very far apart.
So, Tom, bottom line, do you think baseball comes back? And if you're optimistic, can you give baseball fans some reason to be optimistic?
I remain optimistic, and I'll tell you why. I think the downside of not playing this year is so enormous that it will force something to happen to get the game back on the field. Now, obviously, a little less optimistic based on the commissioner's response. And if you notice, a statement from Tony Clark and a statement from Rob Manfred in the last few days both used the same phrases: bad faith negotiating. That's kind of the preamble to a grievance, right? And it could be from either side. The players have threatened, we're going to file a grievance because you've been negotiating in bad faith, and there's $1 billion at stake. And the owners could say, well, the players haven't been negotiating here in good faith. So there's a little bit of positioning going on beyond whatever the 2020 season might be. But I do think if baseball does not play a game for a 17-month period, going back to Game 7 of the 2019 World Series, and if there is an opening day in 2021, that will drive so many people away at a time where there's so many other options. Last work stoppage in baseball in 1995, a generation ago. Think about all the entertainment options a sports fan has since then. So the idea that people will just come back to baseball after they're out of the habit of following it for a year and a half, that's naive. So that's why I say that should force, even if it's a 48-game season, to get baseball back on the field and especially to have a postseason.
Tom, I'm not naturally a conspiratorial person, And I'm certainly not someone that takes everything Trevor Bauer says as gospel. But I must admit, I thought Trevor Bauer made some compelling arguments yesterday on Twitter, which is, if people missed it, his supposition was that basically the Rob Manfred, Major League Baseball, are trying to run out the clock so they can then just impose a 50-ish game season as allowed by the March agreement. And even if they have to pay the 100% prorated salaries, it still keeps them under that $1.5 billion threshold of total payout that they haven't been willing to go over. Bauer damn near convinced me. Do you think there is something to the fact that maybe ownership is trying to delay for a couple weeks in order to impose a shorter season?
Well, I know this, Nick, that I've heard the same things out of the Players Association and some of their leaders, that they think this is a case of running out the clock because, let's face it, the owners make their money in the postseason. Players make their money in the regular season. So the incentive to play more regular season games is on the players' side. And the owners have operated that March agreement allows Rob Manfred to schedule games at a length of his determination. So that's why I think the players are saying, yes, they want just 48 games. So there's no incentive for them to break out the bats and the balls and start playing games now because they want a short regular season, long postseason. So I understand where Trevor's coming from, but here's another way to look at this, though, guys. It's not so much he's trying to hold both ideas, that it's 100% we'll come back, Rob Manfred, and now I'm not so confident. Think about what changed in the meantime. The players received the owner's proposal, and in their mind, it was just so bad they didn't bother to counter, and they essentially threatened the idea of $1 billion grievance. That's a change in circumstances, and that's why the commissioner changed his public stance. But I think Trevor's onto something here, that the clock, a shorter season, is in favor of the owners. Let's see if that is their game plan.
Oh, Tom, the two sides are so far apart. They seem to be going in the wrong direction. You mentioned Rob Manfred and Tony Clark and what both sides have had to say over the last couple of weeks, and you touched on it. But tell us more about what you make of the Players Association response to some of Manfred's comments in the last couple of days.
Yeah, well, I think I've seen the players as galvanized on this issue as anything I've seen in recent years. And when you think about it, it's easy to understand why. Literally easy. We're not talking about a complicated economic system, free agent compensation, a pension plan. We're talking about guys having money taken out of their paychecks. Everyone understands that. They thought they did that back in March with the agreement they had. And now they're saying we don't want to take a second pay cut. So I think in that sense, I think the owners are a little bit surprised about how dug in the players have been on this issue. I don't know if they've underestimated that, but I think this galvanization of the players union is something we haven't seen to this level with this generation of players. Now they're at the point where I'm sure a lot of them are saying, well, we're only talking now about maybe a third of the season. Where is our incentive to come back? And that's why I say be careful. The incentive is long-term. You can go ahead and punt a 31 or 48-game season, but be careful of what the ramifications are longer term.
Tom, if baseball does come back, and you're optimistic, and I like to be optimistic, what is it going to look like? We're going to have empty stadiums, and I know there's some ideas being kicked around about not extra innings and more doubleheaders and things like that. What is baseball going to look like if it does come back?
I think it has a chance to be exciting. That's the crazy thing about this, that if you get the game back on the field, the narrative changes immediately. Think about a season. Let's say it's 48 games. It begins immediately in the middle of a pennant race, right? Every team has got a shot. It's probably a wild finish with half the teams in baseball fighting for a playoff spot. Every game will count. I mean, people sometimes knock baseball if the season's too long, right? Too many meaningless games. Every game is meaningful. So I love the idea that there's some urgency to a baseball season from Jump Street. I'm not big on this idea of 7-inning doubleheaders. Don't gimmick up the game. But a key part of this, guys, is how the game now is presented on TV. Because without fans in the stands, it will look and sound really different, probably not really good. And that's where you need the cooperation of the players. Because I don't know about you guys, I want to hear those players mic'd up. That's part, I think, of how you deliver now what I call studio sports, right? Without fans in the stands, you better enhance the sound, the natural sounds of the game, and the players and the crack of the bat, all those things from field level, bring people in, because you're not going to have the excitement from the fans. That's going to take cooperation with the players, though, to sign off on this. And that's where negotiations are actually hurting the possibility of seeing a better product to us as fans.
Tom, the sad thing is the only thing at this point that could probably save baseball is actual baseball, which we don't have right now. Tom Verducci, thanks so much for joining us. Great insight. Really appreciate that. We are going to take a break here on First Things First. Coming up on the other side, Rockets GM Daryl Morey to discuss the return of the NBA. Back after this. We got to talk some basketball. With the return of the NBA about 6 weeks away, the Houston Rockets come back with an impressive 40-24 record, currently the 6th seed in the West. And with that, we say good morning to Rockets GM Daryl Morey. Daryl, good early morning to you from Houston. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to jump right in. So the discussion around the league the last couple of days has been whether or not a restart is the right idea at this time, right now. What sense have you gotten as to where your players stand on that and that time frame?
Obviously, we're going through a very important time to enact change, and so I understand all the players' perspectives. You know, Coach D'Antoni and I have spoken to the players. We recently had several Zoom calls. I think each player needs to figure out how to make the biggest impact on the very important things that are happening in the country. I think Austin Rivers said what he said, and that he felt the players, you know, the resources and having the world tuned into them and being able to make statements from from the restart in his mind was the right way to go. But I think each player needs to think about what's best for them, and we hopefully that involves basketball.
Daryl, organizationally, I know we've always been talking about the NBA restart, and it feels like a continuation of the season. Is that how the Rockets are looking at this, as a continuation of a season, or more of something fresh and new?
I mean, it's a continuation. Obviously, we start with a good record, as Jenna nicely mentioned. But it is basically a second training camp. Our team had the most changes of pretty much of any playoff team with the trade at the deadline to get Covington. And so we're really looking forward to basically a second training camp, getting our defense tighter. That's the area we need to improve if we're going to give ourselves a real chance on the restart.
Daryl, I got a bunch of questions about maybe your favorite player ever, James Harden. I'll start with this one. I think that James. Oh, my second favorite. Maybe he's my favorite. Who knows? I've never disclosed who my favorite player is. I don't know what you're talking about. Listen, I think a lot of the discussion surrounding James's playoff performance has been overwrought and I think statistically inaccurate. I do think, though, with the offensive workload he's carried in Houston and a guy who almost never misses games, it is reasonable to ask if by game 85, 90, 95, if he is a little worn down, because you now have this break and he's all of a sudden svelte. It looks like he lost weight. I don't even know if he wanted to, but he did lose weight. Is there, in your opinion, do you think you're going to see maybe a slightly different James Harden this postseason than we've seen in the past?
Obviously, having Russell Westbrook, a big change as well. He's someone who's so dynamic and can create offense and with the floor space as well. So I would say, all else equal, I mean, the teams, but I do think a restart, favors us in a bunch of ways. We have the most veteran team in the league. A second training camp, like I mentioned, will help us, I think, more than most teams. And then, I think everyone on the Rockets, myself, Coach D'Antoni, James, Russell, Eric Gore, I mean, all the way down the roster, we've all gotten to that stage in our career where there's really one thing left, and we're all focused on it.
So you said, you made a comment last week, Daryl, that you feel like you've let James Harden down by not finding the right players to help him win a title. And then the comment took off and everyone started talking about it. It picked up steam. So now heading into the restart, there are a number of options for different restarts. The one that's currently planned on right now, the amount of rest your whole team has, and the amount of people that you have surrounding, the type of players you have surrounding James Harden. Are you confident this is the best team surrounding him as you get ready to restart this season?
Well, we love the team. I do think, the 65-win team is actually one of the best teams not to win. Obviously, we didn't win it. That was a very good team. This team, I think, has every good a chance as that team. And, the best way to win a title is to have a great team and be in it every year. We've done that. What I meant talking about James was, he is going to go down as one of the greatest players of all time for sure. And it's my job to help him. So the fact that we haven't won always does weigh on me.
So when we talk about the style of play of the Rockets, Daryl, and James is number 1 in isolation and Russell's number 2. I think Damian Lillard's number 3. Is there an idea that, hey, if it doesn't work this year, let's take a new page out of the Sloan playbook and try something else? Or are you guys still all in on isolation and small ball regardless? Make
it sound so negative, Kevin. Our offense is one of the best of all time. I would say, when you have one of the best offenses of all time, no matter how we do it and improving defense, I would think if we can't get our defense better, that's going to be a big focus, how to improve that. But we have a great team. Obviously, Golden State not in our way. So when you have a team as close as us, you're going to want to keep it together and continue to make changes like we have the past year, adding Covington, playing with more spacing, adding obviously a MVP level guy with Russell Westbrook.
Daryl, you said something a few months ago, shortly after Russ got to the team, that I thought was really interesting, which is almost the different personalities of Russ and James, which is Russ was more of a, not that he wasn't working hand in hand with you, but he was out there ready to play. He wants to go play. And what you said about James was that James, I don't want to call him your assistant in the front office, but you and him talk basketball, you talk strategy, you talk about concepts. And I thought it was really interesting, and we didn't have time to get into it further. I think it's a part of James Harden the audience would like to know about. What did you mean by that, and what is that collaboration like?
Yeah, with James, he's a basketball genius. I talk to him constantly about basketball, about players who are potentially available. He sees things that I don't see. Hopefully I see a few things he doesn't see. And it's a partnership. And I think James and Russell also have a partnership. James, as you can tell on the floor, he's a thinker. He's obviously a dynamic player and athlete, but he gets to a lot of his things through, subtle shifts in, how he positions himself, how he works with screens. Whereas, Russell's this amazing leader, sort of vocal guy, plays with a passion and a chip. They're just a good partnership, I think, going into this restart.
Daryl, you talked about how you've come close every year. You got to be close to put yourself in a position to win. You're sitting outside in what looks like a well-manicured, beautiful man cave. You got birds all around you. Everything you say sounds so peaceful and lovely.
I do have birds.
So comfortable for me. You got a lot of birds, I'm not going to lie. Despite all of that, how much pressure are you feeling that you guys come back into the restart with the record you have? James Harden lost a ton of weight. Everyone wants to see what he can do. Is there pressure on you guys with the shortened rest of the season now to win it all?
It's basketball pressure. I think we've seen real pressure in the world right now. And, thankfully looks like some real material changes are being made and everyone's looking at themselves. But basketball pressure wise, yeah, it's a lot. Again, two of the greatest players ever on our team. We should win this thing.
Daryl, I dug deep down into the Sloan archives looking for home court advantage papers, and I found one about the referees. Have you done any research on home court advantage and how that will statistically affect the flow of the game, or what are your thoughts on a neutral court?
Yeah, I mean, our players are used to playing on neutral courts. I mean, that happens actually quite a bit over their lifetime. But in terms of home court, yeah, referees are demonstrably a big part of home court advantage. That will go away. Obviously, there's no crowd. I mean, it changes how seeding works. So, you know, we ended up in the 6 only like a game or something out of, 4 or something like that. I forget exactly the details, but the seeds aren't going to matter as much. It's just going to be your path to the final. And but yeah, it's going to be a little bit like the Lakers-Clippers turnover where, they change the rafters and then the next game starts.
Daryl, we got less than a minute left. I just want to ask one Russell Westbrook question, piggybacking off Wilds. Some players, it seems, feed off the energy of the crowd. Russ, I feel like, brings that energy with him everywhere, no matter the gym, if it's empty or not. Is that what you see as well? And do you think, we got about 40 seconds here, that helps you guys in the restart?
Yeah, James talks about Russell as this never-ending, like he's never seen him tired, ever. And James obviously has played with him many years, both in OKC and now here. Somehow Russell has captured some Marvel Universe energy source that no one else seems to have, and he brings it at all times.
Houston Rockets General Manager Daryl Morey. Daryl, thank you as always for joining us. Good luck to your team this year. And that's it for us. We're back
and enjoy
here
the bird watching.
Have a great day, everyone. Oh, enjoy the birds, Daryl. Bye, everyone. Stay safe.